Animation writer Jack Thomas started his professional life as an Ohio lawyer heading up his own one-man law firm. After he won his first and only case before the Ohio Supreme Court, Jack decided it was an opportune time to retire with a perfect record and commence a career as a stand-up comedian, which he successfully pursued for a number of years. Moving to Hollywood, Mr. Thomas segued into the writing game. After stints on live-action movies and cable shows, he became a freelance, then staff writer, and finally associate story editor on Nickelodeon's iconic Fairly Odd Parents. Since then, Jack has been executive producer and showrunner on Disney's The Replacements, also a writer for Cartoon Network's The Regular Show. We talked in the conference room of the Animation Guild. We are today talking to Jack Thomas on October 13th, and you have been a high-performing animation writer now for a decade.
Yes.
And
which probably makes me the least qualified person you've interviewed.
No, actually, the reason that I think this is important to do is I've interviewed ink and paint people, I've interviewed storyboard artists, I've interviewed story directors, I've interviewed directors, I've interviewed a lot of animators, but I haven't interviewed any strict, pure writers. I mean, people who write and storyboard, but nobody who just writes scripts. And because you've written on two highly successful shows for long periods of time, The Replacements more recently, and before that on Fairly Odd Parents for a long time, and wrote the bulk of the scripts. Didn't you write probably more of the Fairly Odd Parents scripts than any other single writer, or you were close?
I think it's close. I think, you know, Steve Marmel was there before me. He was the story editor when I came on. But I think I probably wrote 30 of them. And I'm sure Scott Fellows, who was there after me, and Kevin Sullivan, they're probably close to mine. I mean, Fairly Odd Parents just goes on and on. So, but I think I've written about as many as anybody, except maybe Butch or Steve themselves.
Yeah. So you were up there in the top.
Oh yeah.
So, and you were on that show for quite a long time.
I was on it for 4 years. Yeah, it was my first show in animation. I was lucky to be on it. It just happened. I ran into Steve Marmel, who was the story editor at the Improv, and we were talking about his act, and he said, "You know what? I'm working on this animated show. Do you want to come in and pitch story ideas?"
Yeah.
And I think they'd just done their first 13, and they got picked up for another 20 or something. And so I came and I pitched a couple of ideas, and Steve said, "Boy, I really like this one." And literally, we just typed it up in the room.
Yeah.
Submitted the premise. They liked the premise, so I wrote the outline. They liked the outline, so I wrote the episode. And it insanely 22-page long script for an 11-minute cartoon.
Yeah, well, it's sort of the double.
It was the first thing I'd ever done in animation, and it got made. And then they came back at a certain point and said, "You know, of all the freelance writers we've used, you suck the least." Well, because it's really hard for a freelance writer to catch on to a show's idea. You just don't have the backstory, as much of the history.
You don't know how the characters. Yeah.
So they gave me a 10-week trial, and then at the end of the 10 weeks, they gave me like a 1-year contract. So it was fun.
So you were 10-week trial staff, and then you went on, and then you just were on season after season, and you became their workhorse go-to guy in studio then, right?
Yeah, and then at some point I became the associate story editor, which sort of meant that I was in charge of the freelance scripts would come to me, and my job was to take them and turn them into Fairly Odd Parents scripts.
So you essentially you take the freelance script and rewrite it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they'd be really close, and then sometimes they wouldn't be close at all. And because you've been on the show for as long as I've been on, you have a sense for what's going to play. Yeah. You know, oh, geez, we've done that.
Where the characters are going to go and all that stuff.
We can't do this crowd scene.
Yeah.
I was lucky early on. I became friends with a lot of the board artists, like Dave Thomas and Heather Martinez, and that really helped me because I began to understand what they went through and how extra long scripts cause them extra pencil mileage. And, you know, I sort of learned early on from them. And with Butch Hartman running a show, who's an artist, you know, he respects the board artist too. So I think I learned faster than a lot of newbie animation writers to not kill the board artist if you could avoid it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an ongoing problem that I've encountered over and over and over, you know, over long scripts and massive crowd scenes and lots of staging. And
well, yeah, because you get into animation, and one of the things they tell you is the great thing about animation is we can do anything. If we want to go to the Roman Coliseum for a scene and then come back, and you see that sort of thing on Family Guy all the time.
Right.
We can do that quick cutaway. Well, you know, they don't remind you that somebody's got to now design the Roman Coliseum.
Right, and somebody's got to draw all
and
those
if you're
people
gonna put people in
stands.
it, and then those lions, you probably want them all to look entirely different. You can't have 6 identical lions.
Yep.
So I think it's a little unrealistic when they go, oh, you can do anything in animation. You don't have the budget constraints of having to build the set. Well, somebody's got to draw it. You got that consideration. You got to look out for those people.
Yeah. I had a director tell me early on when I did my little television stint, cut away. We don't want to see that car crash. Have the car go past, and then have the off-screen crash, and then we'll see the results. We don't want to have to this. And we don't, oh,
well, but sometimes it's television, and it's you've got to deliver it at a certain point. So sometimes you have to do things like that are economical. And then the trick is, how do you make that funny?
Sure.
You know, it's the same thing Spielberg did on Jaws. The shark isn't working. All right, how do we work around that? Hey, you end up making something better sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you can't show the shark eating the person. So
now, what were the big challenges? Because you were on that show a long time. What were the challenges that you faced working on Fairly Odd Parents, or was it creative decisions, schedules?
Well,
coming up with ideas.
I thought Nickelodeon had a pretty reasonable production schedule, especially for the writers. I think the big thing became, after a while, whenever you're doing a show with a magical power, you have to have limitations to it. You have to have some kryptonite, and we had a rule book called The Rules.
Yeah, you got to have the rules, exactly.
And at a certain point, you know, you wish you hadn't made some of those rules, because now they're ruling out stories. The hardest thing to do was to come up with entertaining new things that this kid could wish for that we haven't wished for before.
Yeah.
And entertaining ways to resolve the stories that didn't always end up with Timmy going, I wish everything was back the way it was.
Yeah.
So that was, I mean, that to me, I loved working at Nickelodeon. I thought it was one of the most creative places. Of course, it was my first gig, so I didn't. It was my first gig in animation. It wasn't my first writing gig. But
right.
It was my
We're
first,
going to go back to that. But.
Yeah, it was the first time I'd ever been in the studio. So to me, the big challenges were mostly the creative. And then on any show, when you're a writer, it's also sort of guessing what the showrunner wants. And learning to just accept that sometimes the things you think are the funniest things in the script just aren't going to make it.
Yeah.
Because somebody above you doesn't agree with your sensibilities.
Yeah. So, we'll segue out of Fairly Odd Parents and back to your beginnings. You grew up in Ohio.
Yeah, I was a military kid, so I was born in Virginia, raised in Ohio primarily, a little bit in California, but mostly in Ohio. Went to Ohio University, got a degree in communications. I had a scholarship. I was on the speech and debate team, so I was sort of a nerd.
So, and that's where you met Nancy Cartwright.
Yeah, Nancy was on the speech team too, and I always remember her saying, you know, I'm leaving Ohio U after my sophomore year. I'm going to move out to California, and maybe I'll go to UCLA, but I really want to get into cartoon voices. And we're going like, Nance, how do you even do that? And
she was working with Dawes Butler.
Yeah, she goes, I've already corresponded with this Dawes Butler, and I'm going to take classes from him, or he's going to mentor me. And we're like, oh, all right, kid, you know, whatever, follow your dream. I mean,
you thought, yeah, she'll go nowhere. Then you thought, well, no, she's
Well,
done really
I think fairly quickly she got a part on Richie Rich.
Yeah.
And we're like,
she did.
all right, Nance. And then The Simpsons, and then wha-bam, you know.
And she's done everything and all kinds of stuff since. So.
Well, when I first came out to L.A. and got in touch with her and we got together,
Yeah.
I think The Simpsons might have been on it had been on a few years. She was clearly prospering. And I said, Nancy, please tell me that you're happy. Because you're the only person I know who had a dream and who has hit the home run ball.
Yeah.
And if you tell me you're not happy, I'm just going to move back to Ohio and quit the business.
Yeah, yeah. And she said, yeah, I'm happy.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Nancy is one of the most self-content people I know. You know, she always sort of self-contained, you know, but I don't think fame has really changed her. She's very cool. She does all this charity work. I'm always going to these charity poker tournaments.
Has two kids.
Has two kids, Lucy and Jack. Jack, interesting. Just kidding, Nancy. No, Nancy's great. I mean, and she's always, in fact, one of the animation things I worked on, I think right before I got hired for Fairly Odd Parents, she was doing something online for NASCAR. She was doing an animated cartoon, and I think I was going to be a writer on that. Maybe I wrote one script, and then I got a call to go to Fairly Odd Parents as full-time staff, so I had to drop out of it. But she loves animation. I mean, It's a lifelong dream of hers to be involved with animation, and I think she still even wants to be involved on the producer side.
Yeah, yeah, and
so then the crazy thing is, she ends up, when I run the replacements, she ends up playing Todd. She's one of the stars of the show, which was so great for me to see her every day. Every record, she would come in and we would just laugh. How did we end up here?
Here we are working together.
I mean, her, I understand. How did I? Because this was, believe me, I just wanted to do funny things. That was my goal in show business.
So you had a yen to be doing funny things as a performer and or a writer from early on, then, right?
Yeah, when I was a little kid, I was enraptured by stand-up comedy on TV, and I have a report card from the third grade where instead of bringing something in for show and tell, I would read comedy monologues out of a book. And I really wanted to do it, but at the time I think I lived in Virginia, and I thought, well, you know, show business
is way far away.
Is in L.A. What's the next best job? And I thought, oh, President of the United States. And I think you have to be a lawyer to do that. And talking good is good when you're a lawyer, and I know I can talk in front of people, so I decided I would become a lawyer.
So you decided to be a lawyer and forget about the comedian thing, and this is when you were at Ohio State? Or were your parents saying you should be a lawyer? Or
my parents didn't care. You know, I think like most parents, my parents just wanted me to have a job that made money.
And be happy.
Yeah, they wanted me to be happy. And so I think my parents know me really well. When I told them I was going to law school, they had to deal with all the kids. They would pay.
Now, how many brothers and sisters?
I have two sisters. I have an older and a younger sister.
Okay.
They would pay for your undergraduate college. You had to pay for your own books and your own spending money, but they would pay for the tuition but with me, when I said I wanted to go to law school, and my parents said, "All right, we'll support that, but you cannot get an undergraduate degree in education," which was weird because my dad was a teacher.
He didn't want you to go that route.
They didn't want me to have anything to fall back on.
Oh, I see.
They said if you get an education degree and can fall back on teaching, we're afraid when you go to law school, if it gets tough, you'll drop out and become a teacher, and we don't want you to, so you cannot get an education degree. So I got the very usable Bachelor of Science of Communications degree instead.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then from that, you went straight into law school.
Yeah, I went to Ohio State Law School, and
joined a law firm.
No, opened my own practice.
Oh, you had your own practice.
Well, I had a nickname at the law school, which was the Phantom, because I stopped going to class. I would go to the first day of class, pick up the syllabus, and then if I didn't find the class interesting, I stopped going. There's not the first year. The first year I went to all the classes. I had the 1L experience. And then after that I realized what you did in class did not matter at all in law school. Being articulate in front of the teacher, you know, when they put you on the slippery slope, handling that well meant nothing. It was all how you did in the exam. So I stopped going to classes I found boring.
And you just hit the books.
So I would just hit the books. I didn't really ever plan to be part of a big law firm. I always had planned to open my own law practice. So I didn't really care what my grades were, as long as I passed. And plus I ran out of money, so I had to work full-time coaching the Ohio State debate team.
Oh, wow.
That's how I paid for law school after the first year. That, and my parents loaned me some money when the third year. But so I was pretty much working full-time. I also think I worked the sense that I did anything to make the money to stay in law school, and a lot of those jobs were during the day, so I couldn't go to class. Yeah, then I graduated.
But you made it through.
But as that was going on, comedy clubs were opening up, and oh boy, you know, some of the people on the speech team that I coached were doing the open mic nights. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll go to one, because I used to love stand-up when I was a little kid. And I went to one, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just try it.
So you worked up an act.
I worked up an act, and I kept winning the amateur night at the local club, and you got $50 and got to be the opening act for the pros.
All right.
And then we all heard about this club, this one-night gig in Lexington, Kentucky, paid $20, and we got hired to go down and do it. You know, like 4 of us drove down. You know, we lost money probably between gas and meals because it was like a 4-hour drive each way.
But it was showbiz.
But that guy became like a big booker. It turns out he started opening these little gigs all over the South. And he would always say to me, he goes, you know, if you ever want to do it, I'll put you on the road full time. So I'd been practicing law just around 5 years.
So you'd been in law practice for 5 years.
Yeah, that happened in law school. Then I passed the bar, and I'd open up my practice.
And that fell away for a while.
And I was actually at the point I was actually beginning to break even and make money. Because who hires the rookie lawyer? Who goes, gee, my life is on the line. Let me get that guy who's been open a week and a half.
You're the public defender and all that kind of stuff.
He advertises in the coupon magazine. Let me get that kid because...
He's cheap.
You know, my first client was actually the son of the woman from the phone company who set up my phone service for my office. She goes, you're the nicest lawyer I've ever talked to. My son really needs to try to get out of this health spa contract. And would you talk to him? So her son comes in and he talks to me, and he's, you know, it's a typical thing. He went to the health spa, they signed him up for the contract, the 3-day waiting period was over, he was stuck. You know, you're stuck in this contract. You bought this ridiculous 4-year, you know, $500 a year contract. I can't, you got to live up to it. I'm really sorry. He's walking out of the room and he goes, man, it just isn't fair. And I go, well, what's not fair about it? He goes, well, they promised me special exercises. I go, what do you mean special exercises? And I noticed he limped, but I didn't realize why. He goes, well, they told me they had equipment for people with one leg. And he pulls up his leg, and he's got a wooden leg.
You didn't know that.
I didn't know that. I go, well, come back in and sit down. Let's talk about this.
So now you had an angle.
Now I had an approach. So when... You know, they sued all these poor people in small claims court, so he showed up in small claims court with me, his lawyer, and I just went over to the other lawyer who I happen to know, and I said, you know, Marilyn, my guy's got a wooden leg, and they promised him special exercises.
They're not delivering.
And they don't seem to have the special equipment that they said they had for one-legged people, and I'm going to tell you that Exhibit A for the defense is going to be his left leg. What do you want to do? And she goes, why don't we just dismiss it? Good deal.
So you were gold.
I was gold. I got a good result for my very first client.
And you won your case in front of the Ohio Supreme Court.
Yes, which again came from stand-up comedy. It was one of the places that I did. It had an open mic night, and he had this arcane little tax problem that dealt with paying unemployment insurance. And I said, you know what, you're such a nice guy, I'll go to the hearing for you. You shouldn't go by yourself. We lost the hearing, I appealed. We lost the next appeal, we appealed again, we lost that appeal. And along the way, and I think he's paid me a whole $300 for all this. I go, you know what, I honestly think you're right here. If you want to pay the filing fees, I'll do the case to the Supreme Court for free if we get to the Ohio Supreme Court. Odds are they won't take it. Sure enough, they take it. The next thing I know, I'm arguing in front of the Ohio Supreme Court. I've been in a courtroom maybe 5 times in my life. But, you know, the one thing I knew sort of from stand-up and from doing speech competitions in college was I knew I was going to sound great. I just didn't know if I could hit all the right points. And at one point, I made this argument. I said, the court should never intentionally misinterpret a law just to provide more revenue for the state. And this one justice goes, Mr. Thomas, are you suggesting this court would ever intentionally misinterpret the law? And I actually did the Rodney Dangerfield tie thing. I go, oh, no, Your Honor, we all know that this court has never made a wrong decision. and the three of them started laughing. And I thought, okay, I got out of that.
I've got him.
And I go, what I meant to say, Your Honor. And I ended up winning that case.
And you carried the day.
I carried the day. I won that case.
And
I actually won in the Court of Appeals, come to think of it, because I've won 2 cases in the Court of Appeals. I won 1 case in the Ohio Supreme Court, and I won 1 criminal trial.
This has got to be getting into the papers at least a little bit. It seems to me your reputation is going up.
No, there's no reputation. My reputation was I was the least expensive lawyer in Columbus, Ohio. I charged so little, it was insane. I literally, when I started, charged $35 an hour. Does a starting board artist get that much? It was basically because I just wanted, you want experience, and it wasn't about making money to me, It
was about getting
experience and maybe trying to help the little guy and get better at my craft, and right about the time I did, I decided to quit and become a stand-up.
And after you hit your plateau, you said, okay.
Yeah, come on. I want to know.
Now talk about how you segued from pursuing the law into pursuing a stand-up career.
Well, I decided I would try a week on the road to see if I would like it. So I booked a gig at a club in South Carolina, and after the very first night, I was sure. I just know I love it. This is what I want to do. So I sat down in my little hotel room. And I sat in front of my video camera that I took with me. It's a big honk. Remember those big ones? And I recorded this thing. I poured my heart out to my parents to say, you know what? I know you know I'm a lawyer, but you also know I love to do this. Please accept that this is my decision. And I sent it off to my parents the next day. So I finished out the week in South Carolina, and I went back to Columbus where I lived. And already the tape had come back from my parents. And I'm going, well, what does this mean? And I open it up, and there's a note from my mom, and she goes, Jack, what do you think you're doing? You know our machine's a beta. So they hadn't even been able to play the tape.
They can't play the tape, so you thought.
So I had to call them up and go, look, I got to try this. I can always go back to being a lawyer, but.
How did they ultimately take it? When they finally found out?
Honestly, my dad was just happy that I was doing something I loved. And my mom didn't speak to me for about 6 months. Every time I would call home, she would be mysteriously doing something.
That's right. Talk to you.
And I finally got them to come to a club and see me perform. And they sort of, I think, then realized. My dad always knew that I loved doing it. I think my mom realized, you might be able to actually make a living at this.
She was worried that you were going to starve to death.
Yeah, it was never about embarrassment of what I was doing. It was, you're insane. Nobody can make money in show business. Yeah. We're from Ohio. That just doesn't happen.
So how long did the stand-up career last?
About like 10 years.
10 years
more. The first few years were all in the Midwest. You could actually make a living doing stand-up, just going around at playing clubs, because most clubs have in the Midwest, their shows. There's an opening act. There's a middle act opening act does like 10, 15 minutes. The middle act does 25 to 30.
Yeah.
Then the headliner comes in and does 45. And early on in my career, I was just really popular as a middle act because my act was really clean and pretty smart.
You got the laughs.
And yeah, I got the laughs. I was pretty smart. I didn't juggle or anything that would be hard to follow. So everybody wanted to follow me. There was me from Ohio and another guy from Ohio that everybody loved to work with. And that other guy was, I don't even know what happened to him. His name was Drew Carey. And we were really good friends, actually, because we would always be checking to see what we were getting paid in the same clubs. And we would always try to leapfrog the other guy by like $50 a week. Oh, he's getting $700, I want $750. And living in the Midwest, you could... My first year on the road, I worked 48 weeks out of 52. So you can make a living doing it,
And you enjoyed being on it.
Oh, I loved it. I got to see America. I bought this great book called Roadside America that had all the little tiny tacky tourist traps, like the hotels shaped like teepees. And
did you visit all of them?
Oh, as many as I could. And just, yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was really, really fun. And it was the same sort of thing that I did when I was first a lawyer, which was, let's get some experience. Let's get out there.
And do it.
And you're playing all these clubs that it doesn't matter. It will never matter to Hollywood how you do in South Carolina. They're not going to see you there. You're never going to be discovered there.
Right.
So you have a little bit of freedom to fail, but not in a high percentage of your act because you want to get booked back.
Right.
But you can experiment more out on the road, and you can be more yourself out on the road. Whereas every time you go up at the Improv here in town, if there's somebody in the audience who's big, you can't fail.
You've got to hit all the right notes.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the pressure of performing out here.
Yeah.
And then eventually I moved out I moved to Chicago first. My friend John Rigi said, "Oh, Chicago's got a burgeoning stand-up community. You should move to Chicago." He's another Ohio guy. And then as soon as I moved to Chicago, he goes, Dennis Miller's introduced me to Brillstein Gray. I'm moving to L.A. You want to move to L.A.? So I moved to L.A.
You moved to L.A.
Like I'd been in Chicago like eight months and I moved to L.A. to be a roommate.
Well, how did you find Chicago in the 8 months that you were there?
Cold, but it was my first really big city experience, so it was a nice buffer for LA. I mean, I really liked it. I love being able to take the train places
and were the clubs and the comedy venues in Chicago interesting?
They were good. They were tough to get into, and that was one of the reasons I agreed to go to LA. Was I really thought if I'm going to get treated like an idiot, I might as well go to L.A. where the people treating me like an idiot could put me on TV.
Yeah.
Whereas the people in Chicago were just protecting their little fiefdoms. But it was a great town to do comedy. The Midwest is a great place to do comedy. People aren't pretentious. They just want to be entertained. I mean, in the heyday of comedy, these were people paying $10 or $12 for a ticket to come see a show, and so they wanted the show to be good.
Yeah. So they were pulling for you.
As opposed to, in LA where they're coming to see a showcase show and they know some of these guys are going to suck. Here, this is their big night out. They really wanted the show to be good.
Yeah. And you played Vegas, right? You opened for...
I played Vegas. Years later, well, I played a bunch of places in Vegas. My best gig was with Drew Carey. I ran into him doing a charity show and he goes, "Hey, I'm working in Vegas. Do you want to work with me?" I go, "Sure." Next thing I know, there are names up on the Caesars. We were playing the main room at Caesars, and we were standing out front taking pictures of it. He goes, "Can you believe our names are up there, Jack?" And I said, "Drew, I just can't believe your name is bigger than mine. That's the part that I got."
How could that happen?
But that was a phenomenal experience. I mean, that's the same place Sinatra played and all the big stars played. And they gave me this great intro. "Please welcome Drew's personal friend." Because the audience was basically high rollers flown in from Cleveland to see Drew. So you're always, when you're opening for a big name, there's always the risk that the audience just doesn't want to see you at all. They just want you off the stage.
So they get to the main act.
I opened for Dolly Parton once, and that was pretty much that. And I don't think the Dolly Parton audience liked it when I did my gun control material. I just have to think that maybe that might have been a miscue on my part. Maybe I didn't analyze the audience correctly. But whenever you work for a big act, there's always the risk that they just, it's the same thing with musical acts opening for. But this was just the greatest experience. I had a suite in Caesars, and
was that a week gig or was that a?
It was just 3 nights.
3 nights.
3 nights. It was great. Now I played the week-long clubs in Vegas, and they're great too. I mean, there's a fantastic improv at Harrah's that is just so much fun to play, and the audiences are just in great moods. And gosh, it's just a great club. I would play that. That was one of the great things at Fairly Odd Parents. They would let me go to Vegas once or twice a year and still play there, with the understanding that during the day I was working on my scripts, which of course I was. You can work on a script at a poker table. Right. No, it was
laptop.
It was a great. Vegas is great. That was my stand-up. I came out here to try to make it as a stand-up, and then I realized when I got out after a while, I really wasn't different enough. I didn't have that hook, that Drew Carey thing, or that Tim Allen thing, or that Roseanne thing, or Brett Butler. You could watch their action, you could go, I know what the sitcom is. I know, she's a put-upon housewife. He's a macho guy in a not macho world. And me, what was my sitcom? I guess he used to be a lawyer, but there were 6 other ex-lawyer comedians out here. I know them all.
Right, right.
So it was...
Had to separate yourself from the pack.
Yeah, I had to find other ways to make money. Because the other thing is, once you're out here, you can't make money out here because you're paid like $20 to do a set at the Improv.
Right.
Whereas on the road, I was making $1,000 a week, as a middle act or as a low-level headliner. But now, if I got to fly back there, a lot of the clubs didn't pay. It basically, when I first moved out here, it was stay in town during pilot season, go back out on the road, drive cross country, and do all summer to make the money to live for the rest of the year to try to get discovered. And that was beginning to wear thin. After
so how many years did that last? A couple of years?
Yeah, I think, maybe 3 or 4 years. And then all to maybe write on the NFL pregame show. That was my first writing gig.
Right. Oh, so
other than writing my own material and my act, and I wrote for a few other comics.
So your first writing gig is writing for the NFL pregame.
On Fox, yeah. They used to open the show with these 2-minute comedy sketches. And they wanted to do it, or the original concept was to do it like it was behind the scenes, like the Larry Sanders Show.
Yeah, yeah.
And they called my friend John Rigi, my old roommate, who got me to move out there, who is now an EP on the Larry Sanders Show. And he said, well, I can't do this. Plus, I know nothing about sports. I know a guy who would be great, and he recommended me. And so they had this very cutthroat system where there were 4 writers. Each week we would submit a 2-minute sketch. They only paid the guy whose sketch they used. He got $750, and I was the guy they kept using over and over.
You knew how to hit all of the right marks.
Yeah, and I think I understood the limitations of how funny Howie Long could be and how funny Terry Bradshaw could be.
The guys that
play to their strengths. I also knew what was going on in sports that week, so I could try to be topical. And it was really fun because I would go on Sundays. I would go a lot of times to the set and watch them film them and be there, if they needed a line, which I was being paid for, but I wanted the experience.
Right.
And then that production company then started writing promos, doing promos for Fox. So then I started writing promos, and Fox back then would do hosted nights. Hey, we're the cast of Mad TV, and we're at Mardi Gras. And, they would do interstitials. So I wrote all those interstitials. And
that lasted for a couple of seasons or 3 seasons?
Yeah, it lasted like 2 or 3 seasons. Well, I got in trouble on the Fox NFL pregame show the year the Browns moved out of Cleveland. I was a big Cleveland Browns fan. So once that happened, every sketch I turned in for the rest of the season was about how Art Modell got killed for moving the Browns, and they wouldn't buy any more sketches from me. But then around that time, I had this weird break, because this is what I think show business is. Honestly, you stay in it long enough, and you get these weird breaks, and you either take advantage of them or you don't.
Right. You either capitalize on them or...
Yeah, or, so this weird thing happened where, maybe this happened before the NFL. Anyway, one of the summers I'd gone back to the Midwest, my room was empty, and my roommate at the time, Eric, his sister came out to visit him, and she stayed in my room. She happened at a party to meet Tom Arnold and got engaged to him. And she ended up marrying Tom Arnold. So he would send scripts over to my buddy Eric, who was a screenwriter, had sold a couple of screenplays, to give notes on. And one time Eric said, I don't have time, Jack, do you want to give him notes? So I gave him notes on this screenplay. Didn't hear anything about it. And then like months later, I'm on the road, and I get this call. Hi, this is Tom Arnold. You want to fly to Toronto and help rewrite this movie? Because I thought your notes were really good. And I go, okay, sure. Let me cancel with these clubs I'm supposed to be at.
So you were still doing the old...
Yeah, I was still doing the clubs. In fact, I was at my mom's house. I think I was on a break, and I was at my mom's house, and my little sister got me out of the shower. Tom Arnold's on the phone. And my mom's so impressed. This is the most impressive thing that ever happened.
Oh, my God, he knows somebody.
So, yeah, I think that was one of my other. So he had assembled these stand-up comics he knew and me, and put us all in a writer's room, and he was shooting another movie at the time, and every day we had to get so many pages done, rewrite them based on what he thought the movie should be, and turn them in. Mm-hmm. And it was the weirdest thing, because there were 4 guys in the room that all knew him and me, And he goes, all right, so get the first 7 pages done by tomorrow morning. And Jack, you're in charge.
And you don't even know him.
I met him like 3 times. And so the first day we don't get enough pages done, and because we don't really know each other. And he goes, well, you didn't get enough done, so Jack, you're not in charge anymore. You're in charge.
Bill's in charge.
And I follow him out in the hall and go, was I really in charge? I mean, these guys, you've known these guys for 20 years. He goes, yeah, I used to get drunk with those guys. That's why I put you in charge. Because I'm sober now. And
they're not.
Well, they were all, a couple, I shouldn't say they were all, gosh, I shouldn't, I feel bad that I told that story.
We can cut that out. Anyway, they're friends.
They weren't all, he just thought I was the most responsible. So that was,
Did you get back in charge again?
Yeah, I got back. I ended up back in charge just because I got things done. So at the end of that, well, when that was all happening, I called my roommate. And I said, I don't have an agent. And, oh, yeah, that's how this happened. This is so convoluted. So his agent got on the phone with me. She said, this is such a low money deal because it's sort of under the table. I'm not going to take a commission. And the smartest thing I ever said in my life was I said, Susan, I want you to take a commission because you need to get used to making money from me.
Yeah.
And then I think I got the NFL pregame show after that because that was another non-union gig. And she goes...
another under the table.
And she negotiated that deal, and then she called me up and she goes, you're working more than some of my union clients. I guess I should sign you. Of course, she signed me and immediately shifted me over to her assistant, who has been my agent ever since.
Oh, I see.
Well, Susan was great, but her assistant, Cheryl, became an agent, and I followed Cheryl from...
Day one.
Yeah, from Premier to Diverse to Don Buchwald to now APA. And that's one of the things that I think gives me an advantage in animation is I have an agent. I mean,
yeah, well, there are a lot of writers that have agents, and there are some board artists that have agents or have in the past. The heyday of board artists having agents were really in the 1990s. There were a lot of them. Yeah, a lot of them had agents. Nancy Newhouse was a pretty big player and still is, and some others. So it's a different venue because writers are using different agents than artists, and most artists don't use agents, and I think it's fewer now, but I'd say in the early or the middle to late 90s there were a lot of artists that had agents.
Really, because it's been my experience, and I think this is maybe one of the bones of contention between artists and board artists and writers, is that almost all the writers have agents.
Right.
And
only a very few board artists.
Right, probably the ones who are going to be creators. And a lot of them, it just seems to me that when you have somebody else speaking for you, you have such an advantage in negotiations, and that you don't have to, there's no hard feelings when it's over between you and whoever they were negotiating with, because you've had someone speaking for you.
Right. And there's a buffer there. You're not the one going in pounding the table.
And I'm fairly confident that my agent has paid for herself the whole way. That she's gotten me better deals than... But when she'd never done an animation deal when I went to Fairly Odd Parents. And I got to be honest, her first reaction was, do these people realize they're in show business? Because a lot of the animation studios aren't used to dealing with agents, and they're used to just sort of running roughshod over people. So somebody who stands up to them and says, no, we want these certain things, was really surprising to them. Now, my agent's Cheryl Peterson is a very pleasant person. But she also is one of these people who just gets it done. I mean, I love her so much.
Yeah.
And now she represents a few more people.
And you two have been together for, what, a decade now, right?
Yeah, she was, yeah.
So you're on Fairly Odd Parents.
Yeah, so
we're sort of back to Fairly Odd.
Oh, yeah.
So
I do all these interstitials. Well, I also write, there's another...
the AMC thing.
Yes, my dream gig. I love old movies. And AMC wanted somebody to start writing better movie intros and funnier movie intros.
And this was during the NFL.
Yeah, this was. Yeah, I mean, this got me out of credit card debt, and so AMC wanted funnier. They actually originally I was supposed to write a show for them that didn't pan out. like a movie quiz type show.
Yeah.
But they wanted somebody to write better intros, so I pretty much was the guy for several years. And then when they would do special hosted things, like it's Whoopi Goldberg hosting New Year's Eve, and it's a Three Stooges marathon, I would be the guy writing, and then I would go to the set, and or it's Leslie Nielsen. Remember when Leslie Nielsen introduced all the Three Stooges? What a grind. That was one of the toughest gigs I've ever had in my life. I quit after writing 50 intros because there are 171 of those shorts, and a lot of them are the same plot repeated. And they wanted a Leslie Nielsen gag, a new original fact about the Three Stooges, then the intro to the short. And after I did 50, I quit. I go, I don't have anything left in the tank. And so they doubled my pay for the next 50. And
then what? You told me a version of this story. So what finally happened? You were probably climbing the walls.
I was climbing the walls. I got a friend of mine, because who was a typist. She was a comic and a typist, and I would have her type in all the fact parts so that I would have time to research and think of a joke. And then as it turns out, she would actually sometimes come up with jokes. I mean, my friend really saved me on this. I went insane near the end. And I love the Three Stooges.
But there's only so much you can say.
But I don't need to know I don't need to know that Shemp quit because he could, Shemp was the original third Stooge. People don't know this. They think he replaced Curly, but when they were doing their live shows, he was the original third Stooge. Right. Actually, there were times when there were like 8 Stooges, but when you're doing vaudeville, when they got slapped by Ted Healy, it was Ted Healy and the Stooges.
Right.
They had to really slap
late
him.
20s, early 30s.
And they had to slap them hard enough that the people in the back of the theater could hurt it. And Shemp hated it, so he quit the act because he didn't want to get hit anymore. So then they go, well, we'll get Curly.
He became a character actor.
Yeah, then they got Curly, who had a beautiful head of hair, and they shaved it for the comedic effect. And so I know way too much about the Three Stooges. It drove me insane. And then after that, I had to write for the Little Rascals shorts. I got those. But I loved that. I loved old movies. I loved being a part of it. And then I went into animation. And
so it was right after the AMC gig that you...
Yeah, that I got into animation. And I was lucky enough to work on what I think is one of the greatest.
Well, it's one of their premiere shows.
Yeah,
and it went on forever. It's like their version of the Simpsons, where they season after season.
Well, it was so funny because SpongeBob is about such a sweet character.
Yeah.
And Fairly Odd Parents, if you really watch them, Timmy's a jerk. The main character on that show, he never makes his wishes for the good of mankind. He just wants to be able to order a breakfast burrito after they're no longer serving breakfast at McDonald's. So he's going to wish that it's going to be 10 o'clock again. So that I loved that we had such a sort of jerky main character. And it's just, it was a great show to work on, great people that I think, some of which I will always be friends with. And it was a great experience. I mean, Butch was really... He was a tough guy to work for because Butch really knew what he wanted. Butch is cursed in the sense that a guy like Butch can do every job on the show. He's actually a really good voice actor. He's a really good writer. Obviously,
he can draw.
He can draw a little bit. And I think when you can do every job on the show, it's really hard to let some of it go and trust other people to do it because nobody's going to do it exactly the same way you are. And in a way, that's sort of a curse, because I think there are two ways to run a show. You run it like Butch does, or like JG does on the regular show, which is the show I was writing on most recently, where it really springs out of your head. Or you do it more collaboratively, where you go, you know what, this isn't totally my sense of humor, but I'm going to let this in because I think it makes it greater than the whole. Which is how I tried to do things on The Replacements. I think SpongeBob is sort of that way too. I think they're really more and I think both ways can work.
Yeah.
The Simpsons is that way. The Simpsons is very collaborative. I mean, they got a 12-person writer room.
They've got and they've done every every possible story because they've done hundreds
Yeah, oh
and
yeah.
hundreds
I mean,
of half
just,
hours. So.
what are those story sessions like? Have you watched the 6 days to 6 days to air, the documentary they did about how they do South Park in a week?
No, but they're really topical. I mean, they bring stuff in the news, and within a week they've got a show.
Oh yeah, it's an amazing thing to watch. Clearly, it must be a non-union show because some people work all night, and they can only do 7 at a time because I think they probably burn everybody out.
It's non-union top to bottom.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and they've gone on and on and on. It's Comedy Central's. It's
so I guess the point I want to make out of this is I think there are a lot of good ways. There are a lot of ways to do a good show. Butch's way was very much it's Butch's. You have to get what Butch wants. There were a lot of times where he would come in with outlines we thought were great, and Butch would go, I would really like to see a scene with this in it. Well, that doesn't fit in the outline. Well, all right, well, we're redoing the outline
so
to fit.
Redoing the outline to make
But the thing is, in the end, it all works. I mean,
yeah,
you can't really argue with success.
Yeah,
and so he was a great guy to work for, to sort of learn the business from. He let me go with him to sometimes when he was doing putting in the final sound, which I'd never seen before. Eventually, they got so busy when they started Danny Phantom, I actually got to voice direct a few episodes. Because one of the things that Butch does that I think is great is he had all the writers come to all the records. And then after he would record a scene, he would turn to us, and if we had a joke that we thought beat what was in the script, we could pitch it. And
so you'd be rewriting as you were recording.
Yes, not that I wouldn't say rewriting, but we'd be punching as
you were recording.
Because I really think that was Butch's philosophy: is try to make it funnier every step of the way to the very last possible second.
Yeah.
And that was a great thing to learn from him. So when I got to voice direct an episode, I was like, Steve wasn't available. Steve would voice direct if Butch wasn't available. Then there was a time when Steve wasn't available, and it was me, and I was just so excited. But all that experience, he let me get all this experience that then helped me on my own show.
Your next gig.
And the same way with Steve Marmel, he really encouraged me to do to take the freelance scripts and do the sort of story editing before they gave me the title, so then he could sort of pitch, Jack is doing this, we ought to give him a title.
Yeah.
And they're both very encouraging guys. And Dave Thomas, who became he's probably a director now. Well, the titles are so weird from show to show. I learned so much about the creative process of a storyboard artist from him. He really was sort of tolerant of me as a noob and sort of really helped me learn what it is the board artist did, and Heather Martinez too, so that I wouldn't write scripts that were impossible to make, because I'm sure some of my first one were, and I'm sorry to whoever had to board some of those. And it's something I tried to take with me to the replacements. I really, even though nobody sort of believed me, because I think there's this innate distrust of writers with storyboard artists, I was really trying to make the shows boardable in a reasonable amount of time.
Well, I mean, when artists would come to me with issues and I would go to you, everybody said after that happened that adjustments were made and things happened and it got better. And I think that my experience when you were the showrunner, I've gone to other studios and other execs and basically get this. And my feeling is I'm just representing these people. I'm just trying to take what they're telling me and give it to you. And it's the rare showrunner that goes, yeah, this is a problem. Thanks for bringing it to my attention. You did that, but believe me, it doesn't happen a lot.
Well, I always felt, for whatever the replacements ended up being, I wanted the crew to feel like a family. I wanted to do things, and again, I probably learned this from Butch. I wanted them to feel like they were all part of the team and that everybody had a chance to make the show great.
Yeah.
Now, I had the advantage of the replacements of I'm not an artist, so I had to say, all right, I need a director. and I'm going to put them in charge of the art, and I'm going to focus on what I know, which is the writing, the voice acting, and the editing. Because I know the timing of jokes, and I know things like that. And then I would let the people who are in charge of the art be in charge of the art as much as possible. And when I would review the art, I would try to be the audience member. I would go, boy, I can't, I'm losing this character in this background, so we need to, you know, or just this design doesn't seem like what I think this character is. Having said that, I've made some egregious mistakes. We had one board artist on the show, very funny, really funny guy. I think it was his first board for us, and the show had been going on for a while, and he pitched it, and I loved it. And I told him how much I loved it, and I told him how great it was. And then my director and my storyboard supervisor took me out of the room and said, that was a really bad board for technical reasons.
Right.
He pitched it great, and he had funny jokes in it, but you just made our life hell because you told him how great it was.
Right, and now we can't go back to it. And then
they took me back in the room with nobody in there, and they go, look how this doesn't match up, and this isn't, you know, this is a funny shot. This isn't the style of the show, and we've been on too long to radically do these shots. And there were things I was just like, oh my gosh, I feel like such a moron because I told him how great it was. Abusive. So then after that, what we did was people would pitch a board, then I would walk out of the room with my director and my storyboard supervisor, and I'd go, okay, what did we think?
That's right.
And they would warn me, you know, they would go, no, that's, you know, we're in good shape art-wise. And I would restrict, oh, this joke works, because I just felt horrible. And it was a really strange situation, and it's something that I learned. This guy was really funny. He's a great board artist. I'm sure he is working somewhere today. Just didn't get our style, for whatever our style was. And it didn't work out. And letting him go was super tough, because I thought he was a great guy and really funny and really talented, but he wasn't fitting into our show. Yeah. And, man, that happens. Yeah. I mean, I'm not back for the next season of regular show because I think in the end my sensibilities weren't close enough to JG's. You know, I was there for 15 months. I'm happy about that. And I think I helped. But in the end, he goes, you know, I'm going to try to find somebody who's a little closer to my sensibility. I totally get that. Right. Doesn't mean I'm not funny. You know? You're funny in a different way. It just means for what he's doing in that show, I'm not the best fit. Right. And JG's a great guy and a great showrunner, and so you know, it was a. So you were on 2 seasons of that show. Oh, I think I was on for the end of one and the beginning of another. I think I came on near the end of season 1, and then I was on all the way through season 2. And he was a great guy. He you know, he's another one of these showrunners. It really comes out of his head. Yeah, that show is really out of his head. But he's sort of he can be collaborative about one thing, but there's a certain style of jokes he's just never going to do on that show. Yeah. And at a certain point, you have to learn that. But that was my first experience on a board-driven show. Regular Replacements and Fairly Odd Parents, both script-driven. This was a show where all you had to do were write the premises and the outlines. Well, let's go back for a minute to the Replacements, because that was really your baby. You pitched it to Disney. No, well, actually, Dan Santat pitched it to Disney. He's a children's book author and illustrator, and totally funny guy. And so they had bought this pitch from him that was basically 2 kids with I think originally it was a wrestler dad and a spy mom, and who had her talking spy car. And the premise, his original premise was that they'd ordered them out of the back of a comic book. And so Disney came to me and said, well, they'd already changed him, I think, to a stuntman instead of a wrestler. How would you make this into a show? So then I wrote a Bible that basically came up with a backstory, that there was a company that provided replacement parents, I think. And you know, like if you were mad at your parents, you could get temporary replacement parents. This was my original pitch for the show. You know, you're mad at your parents, so you'd order these replacement parents, but after a while you realize, boy, I want my old parents back. And so that was what they were teaching kids a lesson. But then they happened to send these 2 parents to these 2 kids who were orphans, and then they're going to give them up. They're keeping these 2 parents, even though they're supposed to be temps. So that was the original pitch in the pilot.
Because it's them or nothing.
Yeah, it's them or nothing. So who wouldn't want to be? And so we did that as the pilot. It tested great. But overseas didn't like the fact that it made fun of orphanages because they were from a scary orphanage. So we had to cut that out. And then I had said all along, they ought to be able to get new parents every week if they wanted. That would be a fun show. We're going camping. We need camping parents. And Disney Channel was not going to go for that. And then I think it was Barry Bloomberg, who was head of Disney Animation, the production side at the time, said, what if they could just replace adults?
Yeah.
So then Disney Channel said, well, yeah, if it's not their parents, we could go for that. So then I had to rewrite the Bible again, and then I created this company that gave them these special secret phones, and that became the premise of the show. And that they had these phones and they could replace adults. So we have a bad Little League coach. They press a button. The guys from this company, Fleamco, from Canton, Ohio, my old hometown, would come in and they would go, oh, you're Little League baseball coach. Congratulations, you won this trip around the world, but you have to leave right now. And, oh, here's your new baseball coach. He's a professional baseball player, but he's really mean. And he puts winning ahead and you don't like him. And so that became what the show was. It's the only show Disney ever tested with parents because they were still worried that parents wouldn't like the idea. So they tested us again, and then they tested us with parents to see if parents would hate the show, and they didn't.
And they gave you a go.
And they gave us a go, so we ended up doing 52 episodes. And
you did a full boat, so that'll run forever.
Well, yeah, we're on Saturday mornings still. I don't know if we're on Disney Channel much, but
one of their satellite. You're probably on one of their satellite cable.
Yeah, or we're on. We could be on in. We were big in England, but that was really fun because I got to work with Nancy Cartwright.
Bart Simpson.
Bart Simpson. I got to work with Darren Norris, who was the best man at my wedding. I got to work with David McCallum, who was Ilya Kuryakin in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And who I idolized, and who was the nicest man on the planet. And it was a great experience. And I think I got Disney to believe in the writer's room because Disney really liked to, before that show, freelance out all their scripts. You'd have a couple of story editors, and all your scripts would be freelanced. And I really believe in having a writer's room so that over time, your writers get steeped in the mythology of the show, and they get a sense for what works and doesn't work, and they get to know the board artists. And as much as I tried to get them to interact, I wanted them to know, the stuff you had to do to the board artists have ramifications. You come to the storyboard pitch and see what they had to draw.
Yeah.
And that was, it was a fun experience and a tough experience being a showrunner.
That went on for two and a half years, right?
I think we started in 2005 and wrapped in 2008. And,
that's 3 years.
And the funny thing was, Fairly Odd Parents still going on during the whole time. After my show began and wrapped, and Fairly Odd Parents was still
going. Did you go back and work on that at all after?
No, they'd moved on. And they have I think they have a very funny writing team. Scott Fellows became a producer on the show, and he's so funny. He does Johnny Test too, and he's got some live action shows. Butch is a machine. He just keeps replacing parts and
moving on.
But it was a great experience. I think I learned something that may be unpopular with board artists, that I don't think the page count of a script matters as much as how long the dialogue is.
Yeah.
Because I really encouraged my writers to put a lot of description in to try to help the board artists.
Yeah.
And that makes for longer scripts. If especially in the Disney schedule, which is way tighter than the Nickelodeon schedule, it's really hard to expect a board artist to go off on a tangent or get really inspirational. A lot of times they just have to board what's on the page.
Yeah, exactly.
So the more you put on the page for them, I think the easier it is for them. It's probably not as creatively freeing, but on a tight Disney schedule, it's so tough to, you can't expect them to improvise entire new things.
No, they don't have the time. It's got to be there on the page, and Ba-boom, ba-boom.
Yeah. So it was that was great. I worked with great people on that show. I loved it. That show kept putting out babies. We had 6 babies born during those
Oh my
3
God!
years.
So it was fertile for somebody.
2 to 1 guy. So you know who
Amazing.
you are.
So, and then after the replacements, you went on to the regular show.
Yeah.
And you were there for over a year. And were there any other?
Well, I had a pilot. Along the way, I've done some pilots that haven't seen the light of day. Who've died at various stages, and I've done a short for. Bob Boyle, who does Wow Wow Wubsy, and I did a short called Grumpy Puppy, and so I've had other projects, and I'm working on another freelance project that's will be out in a couple of years.
Yeah.
And I have to say, it's been a great experience. A very different writer's room, a writer's room where we actually sometimes vote on jokes, which I've never seen in my life. But the people who are running the show, who are 2 of the most creative people I've ever worked with, but I can't name their names, there have been literally times where they go, well, who wants to do it this way? And everybody's vote counts in the room.
Really?
And it's just crazy to me to do it that way. And it works, and it's the nicest writer's room. It's not competitive at all. It's been a really, it's the biggest writer's room I've ever been in.
How many people are in it?
8.
Wow, that's big.
Yeah.
I had a Disney director, old time. He'd been there forever. He would have a whole bunch of people in his office, and we'd vote on voice takes. How many liked take number? How many liked? And it was like, it drove me nuts.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, it is such a fine line to you want to be collaborative, but in the end, it's your butt on the line.
Absolutely.
And people are. It's funny how Darren Norris became a voice actor on The Replacements. The dad in the show was originally voiced by Will Arnett, and then he became unavailable. And then we tried a second actor who was a great actor, but his voice wasn't deep enough for Disney Channel. And if he forced his voice down there, then he lost his ability to have any range, which was really unfortunate because he's one of the funniest actors in Hollywood. And then so we had to go out again, and they had narrowed it down to like a couple of people, and Darren Norris. Well, Darren Norris was the best man at my wedding, and they really were trying to find somebody who wasn't one of the big name voice actors.
Right.
So we had this recasting session, and they played for the execs at Disney. Casting played the 2 voices, and they go, we're not in love with either one. And then casting goes, Dave he was so great. He goes, well, I have this other one. Can we just listen to it? And he didn't tell them who it was. And they go, that was pretty good. They all go, that was pretty good. Who was that? They go, it's Darren Norris. And they go, oh, Darren Norris. It's always Darren Norris. And they go, Jack, what do you think? And I go, well, I got to be honest. Maybe I should disqualify myself. He was the best man at my wedding. And they go, Jack, we're paying you to make these decisions.
So it doesn't matter that he
So it doesn't matter. Tell us who it is. And I go, of course it's Darren Norris. It's obviously Darren Norris. I mean, he's clearly the guy in this. So, and it was a sort of eye-opening to me, that moment of, I'm in that spot because they want my judgment.
Right.
And if nobody's going to go, boy, that show didn't really do as well, but boy, that guy was really collaborative, so that makes up for it. In the end, they just want good product.
Yeah.
Or what they perceive as good product.
So get beyond that he was best man and...
Yeah, get beyond and just give us your opinion. Well, clearly it's this guy. We had to revoice 10 episodes. I need a pro in there who can match the mouth flaps. Mm-hmm. And the other 2 guys, good actors, weren't voice actors. And there's an art to matching, what you see up on the screen and getting it in less than, 20 takes. Voice actors I have a ton of respect for them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, they do a fabulous job. And I mean, the ones that I've known are just so incredibly professional and will shade it and give it to you 50 different ways if you want them to.
It is amazing to me the range some of these people have, and it's you just sit there sometimes and you go, well, I'm sort of thinking something like this, and you articulate like 4 words, like maybe sort of like Regis, but if Regis was a frog, but the frog was taller than all the other frogs, and then a guy like Jeff Bennett will go, oh, do you mean this? Yeah. And you'll go, yeah, that's exactly
what I mean. How did you get that? Because I couldn't. That's amazing. So you've been in the animation game for a decade now, more or less, and you've written live action, and you've been in the comedy business for 10, 15 years before that. So because we were talking about this earlier, what do you think the difference is? Because there's a lot of Writers Guild writers that come into animation, and we were talking about the different muscles that you have to use. And what do you think to be a good animation writer, regardless of what you did previously? What are the important things for an animation writer to succeed as an animation writer?
Well, it's 2 words. It starts with think visually.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to work in kids animation. My rule of thumb is verbal jokes are for old kids. There always has to be something fun, visual going on to engage everybody else. I think the number one thing you have to do is, if you come from 30 Rock to animation, 30 Rock is actually very cartoony, but you've got to, there's a reason, every show that's animated, there should be a reason why it's animated. And if you're just doing a sitcom, you're wasting the medium. Like Family Guy, the reason that show is animated, it's the cutaways, it's the remarkable set changes they can do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the talking dog and
the talking dog, talking baby, and I think so. You have to, number one, funny is funny. Funny words are funny words, whether they're animated or whether they're delivered by live actors. But you're working in animation, so use the animation. Use that.
Use the medium.
Use it to your benefit. Do the things that you can do in animation that you can't do in live action. So I think that's the number one thing, is you have to start thinking visually. You have to start thinking of sight gags. You have to start thinking of how do you make a scene visually interesting, and hopefully help the artist by describing some of that. You can't just say Atlanta burns. You can't just say a fight breaks out. You at least describe it stylistically.
Yeah, exactly.
Say it's a Keystone Cops sort of chase, or give them some clue so that when that poor guy's sitting in his cubicle, he can at least throw in a DVD of the Keystone Cops and go, and know
what the heck you're talking about.
Yeah, or, I think that's the number one thing, is you've got to start thinking of visually. The number 2 thing, I think, is never write down, because most of my stuff's been for kids, except for one thing that I can't talk about. Never write down to them. Never. Yeah. If you write what's funny, but you set it in the kids' world, they'll get the joke. If you give them the right frame of reference. Funny is sort of a universal thing. Those are like my 2 rules. Think visually, and don't write, talk down or write down to the audience.
Yeah. Use the medium.
Yeah.
And in animation, I always wrap with this. So, are there any particular shows, things in animation that you've said, that inspires me, that gets my juices flowing, that's something that I think you aspire to be that good, that particular piece of work and that kind of stuff?
Well, maybe this will seem odd. I'm such a sci-fi geek. Futurama to me is the greatest. Just because it hits so many science fiction beats so well, and I love science fiction. And their characters are all so well defined, and even when they put them in insane situations, they stay in character, and they hit the sci-fi parody beats so well. I love parody. that to me is the, and it's not because my wife did the original casting. I love Futurama.
I wouldn't have known that if you hadn't said it.
Well, my wife actually did the original casting and then King of the Hill. My wife's a casting director and she casts live action and animation. So I think Futurama to me is just phenomenal. I mean, how can you not say The Simpsons? Clearly a phenomenal show that has been able to stay relevant and stay current. Futurama just happens to be my thing because of science fiction. I won't, in South Park, they do amazing stuff. They just are so topical and so unblinkingly, unflinchingly politically incorrect.
Yeah.
And I just respect that so much, even though some of it may disgust me. I still go, wow.
I'm always amazed at what South Park, because I have a 20-year-old that's a devoted disciple of what they do and what they can get away with, and that they're putting it on the air. And I'm thinking, and there was one where they had, the Disney corporate symbol and the Jonas Brothers, and
I know what that episode was.
Go out and get me some GD money, and it was like, ha! And then he'd do that laugh, and it was like, and I was just sitting there with my face atop the floor, going.
Well, you know what? I should say this: on the opposite end of the spectrum, because I have a 2-year-old daughter, I am mystified by how well some of these little kid shows are done. There is a show, it must be out of England, called Peppa Pig.
Yeah.
About a little girl. It's a family of pigs. It's so simple.
Yeah.
And I still laugh at it. And my 2-year-old daughter laughs at it. And a lot of times we're laughing at the same thing, which is odd. Because a lot of times in kids' animation, there's a joke in there for the adults that we're laughing at and the kids not laughing at it, but then they'll laugh at something else.
Yeah.
But in this show, they have this amazing ability, and the stories they're like 4-minute cartoons, and they're so simple. And she and I will laugh sometimes at the same sight gag.
That means they're hitting all the targets.
And I'm just like going, how did you do that? It's so simple. How did you do something so simple, so funny? And I'm so envious of that ability to make it so simple and pure. And the animation style is not, it's not super fancy animation. It's just...
But it's well done.
Yeah, there's this whole new world of little kids animation that like that. And then on the opposite end, a really sophisticated little kid show like Backyardigans, where that show has so many adult jokes in it.
Yeah.
What I think is hilarious about that show, when inspiring about that show is they're teaching lessons, but they're also having fun in crazy ways. Like, it'll be an episode where it's about their cowboys or something. And it's such a simple premise. It's just everything happens in these kids' imaginations, and their backyard morphs into wherever it is they want to go. But they'll be doing a show about cowboys, but the music will all be Bollywood. And you go, what? It's a show about cowboys. Why is it cowboy? They do that every time. They did this rock opera that is so great about a goblin and an egg. I'm just telling you, some of that stuff, little kid stuff, is so amazing to me and very inspiring. And because it was something I would never have been interested in. Because like Fairly Odd Parents has got a pretty cool sensibility to it. So did Regular Show, and we tried to do it on Replacements. It's an older kid show. And then I watch some of these little kid shows, and I go, man, that's pretty creative stuff. And plus, you've had to stick in a lesson,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they're able to keep everybody's attention. There's an art and a magic to that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, that's why those are shorter. Like Peppa Pig's 4 minutes. They're little 4-minute cartoons, I think.
Yeah. Well, still 4 minutes, 40 minutes, 32 minutes, whatever it is. I mean, it takes some chops and some skill. So, is there anything that we haven't hit that you want to mention? I just think you're still working in animation and you're still working in live action. You're working in both areas.
Yeah, it's all it's been pretty much all animation for me now. It's it's like anything in this business. You get in one area, and maybe to some degree you get pigeonholed, but it's also where you get your expertise.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And one thing leads to the next thing, leads to the next thing.
Yeah, and this is where all your contacts are. And at the same time, it's something that I've really grown to love to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to write stuff that's funny. I just want to do stuff that's funny. It turns out that I've ended up in animation. That's great.
But
yeah.
Well, I think you've certainly produced a lot of quality work. So
yes.
There's
and again, I just want to
that.
apologize to anybody who had to board my first couple of Fairly Odd Parents scripts.
All right. Apology. I'll accept your apology on behalf of whatever artists are watching this. Thanks very much.
Hey, thank you.